Hi everybody, it's Dave from Dragonstorm, and I come to you today bearing an upgrade video for the Angrath Planeswalker deck. Angrath is a fantastic little Planeswalker, a little more complicated and a bit more challenging to build around than the Vraska was. I found Vraska very straightforward. Angrath Minotaur Pirate is a 6-cost, 4 generic, 1 black, 1 red Planeswalker. Angrath Legendary. His +2 is Angrath Minotaur Pirate deals 1 damage to target opponent and each creature that player controls. And then -3 is return target pirate card from your graveyard to the battlefield. And his ultimate, a -11, is destroy all creatures target opponent controls. Angrath Minotaur Pirate deals damage to that player equal to their total power. So the idea is to have the opponent with the board, but then strike the opponent with the board that he owns. It's a 5 loyalty Planeswalker when he comes in, so it does take several turns for it to work up, and you're also damaging your opponent while doing that, so it looks like damaging the opponent really is the go-to in this deck here. To start off with, at the bottom of the curve, we have a Grasping Scoundrel and a Daring Buccaneer. I found both of them very effective. I've played against both of them, and they have been very effective early game plays. Again, just to kind of beat down the opponent and get some early hits in. The 2-drop slot is where I think I'm going to make my first upgrade. There are 4 Swab Goblins, and these are 2/2s for 2, so you're a generic Grizzly Bear type creature. And although that is quite serviceable, I find that, especially in this current meta, there are way too many upgrades to the 2-drop 2/2 for 2 card. So we're going to take all 4 of those out, and we're going to start by putting in a Dire Fleet Poisoner. It is a 2/2 for 2, but it has Flash and Death Touch, and when it enters the battlefield, target attacking pirate you control gets +1/+1 and gains Death Touch till end of turn. So very versatile, lots of utility to be had there. So I'm going to start with that. It could come in late game and really end a big threat, which is great. Dire Fleet Daredevil is a card I've never actually used with its enter the battlefield effect. I've always had it, for example, in my pre-release as a 2/1 for 2 with First Strike, and that was always just fine as it was early game. Late game, you can play it, and basically it steals one of your opponent's instants or sorceries from their graveyard and allows you to cast it for any mana and then exile it afterwards. So if they come at you with a repeating barrage, you can say, nope, that's out of your graveyard, I'm using it now, and it's going to exile at that point. So it's got lots of utility and works really well in multiple circumstances. I found that Ascend was easier to get to than I expected, so I'm actually going to throw in 2 copies of the Stormfleet Swashbuckler. It is a 2/2 for 2, but once you have 10 permanents in play, it gets double strike. So a little bit of extra value, again, especially later on in the game, than simply a Goblin swabbing the decks, as it were. All right, so 3-drop slot. This is for creatures we're going with first here. I'm actually not making that many changes to the spell base. For 3-drop, I feel the same way about Angrath's Ambusher as I did regarding Vraska's Conquistador. It is playable. I think it's a fine card, but I think we can do a bit better. There's 3 copies in the Planeswalker deck, and they are 3-cost 2/3s. They do get +2/+0 when you control an Angrath. But it doesn't help you tutor for Angrath necessarily. There are other cards that do that, but I just found it a little bit too situational. And if you've seen these videos before, you know that I like a little bit more consistency. So I'm taking all 3 of those out. Although there are already 2 copies of Fathom Fleet Border, I'm going to add a 3rd one because a 3/3 for 3 is great. And the downside of the card really shouldn't be a big deal, especially by turn 3 with our current 1 and 2 drops. If we own a pirate, we don't take 2 damage from him, so I am very okay with that. I don't think that will come back and bite me too often. I like the Swaggering Corsair, I like the Headstrong Brute already in the deck, but I'm also going to add 2 copies of Lightning Rig Crew. This is a 3-cost 0/5, but you can tap him to do 1 damage to each opponent, and whenever a pirate spell enters the battlefield, or is cast, I should say, is cast, then you untap Lightning Rig Crew. So you can get some extra hits in with that, some good value there. Just gonna move this Repeating Barrage out of the way. So that makes our 3-drop quite large. I'm going to add 1 more, in fact, to that particular list. So we're going 1 above what we had for 3-drops, and that is to add a Foreigner of the Coalition. 3-drop, 2 generic and 1 black for a 2/2. But when it comes to the battlefield, you may search your library for a pirate card, reveal it, and then shuffle your library, put that card on top of it. Whenever another pirate enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life. So it has a very similar sort of potential as the Lightning Rig Crew, while still being a little bit different and still having some good effects there for us. To compensate in the deck, I'm going to take out one of the Gilded Sentinels right away to make room for that Foreigner. And then if you've seen my videos before, you know I'm not a big fan of this card. I took them both out immediately out of the Vraska deck as well. And I will replace that with not 1, but 2 more Direfleet Neckbreakers. Giving your attacking pirates +2/+0 can just be brutal, and they do stack on top of each other, so that could be absolutely terrifying. So I'm 1 over this point from the 60 cards. I'm going to go with my 5-drop slot. I like the Stormfleet Pyromancer, and the idea of doing 2 damage to them directly is useful, but a 3/2 for 5, which requires a raid trigger, I'm not as much of a fan of. I'm going to go for a bit more consistency. I am going to replace those 2 with 2 Stormfleet Arsonists. Same cost, raid trigger as well, which may come into play sometimes, but the 4/4 body is just a little stronger, a little bit more powerful for the later game, and some extra potential because they're both, of course, pirates. That still leaves me 1 above, and I did say I like the spells we've got so far. However, I think that 3 Sure Strikes are unnecessary, especially since we don't mind having some creatures on the board for when Angrath comes in that our opponent has. So I'm going to take 1 of these Sure Strikes out. I like the Lightning Strikes. I like the Repeating Barrage. I like the Impale a lot for those big threats that you can't otherwise deal with. Vanquisher's Banner is great for pirates, and of course Angrath's Fury is good for the tutor effect on Angrath Planeswalker, plus doing damage to a target player. So it really does nicely fit the rest of what we're doing. Unlike the Vraska deck, I actually do have a couple of cards that we can upgrade for the land base. To try to get the curve going nicely, especially with those Fathom Fleet borders, you want to try and get lands in as soon as possible. So I'm going to take out 2 of the Cinder Barons, which come into play tapped, which give us a black or a red mana source, and I'm going to replace them with 2 Dragon Skull Summits. One of them is shiny, in fact. And these enter the battlefield tapped unless you control a swamp or a mountain, so there's a little bit more consistency there with them, which I do like. And I am going to take out 1 of the mountains. There was an overabundance of them after all. And since we do have a fairly good mix of black and red cards, I'm taking 1 mountain out and I'm going to replace it with a Canyon Slough. And this allows us to cycle if necessary if we're flooded, but also to give us that same kind of effect that the Cinder Barons does, with a slight bonus there as well. So that's it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how things went. I'm going to give the deck a try a couple of days when I'm playing next at my local store, and we'll see how it does. I don't expect to beat the top 8 contenders in my standard league, but I certainly hope that it does perform well enough to keep me satisfied with the changes I've made. So if you enjoyed the video, please feel free to give it a like, share, and subscribe if you think it merits such an action. Otherwise, hope you have a fantastic day, and I hope that really helped give you some ideas for upgrading the Angrath Minotaur Pirate Planeswalker deck. All right, take care. Bye-bye.